So good morning, and I'm bringing Vanita on stage, or on the screen as well, not on stage. Goodness me, it sounds like like an old rock concert.
It does. It does.
Good morning, Vanita. How are you?
Yeah, good. Thank you, Jan. Good morning, everybody. Hope you're all well.
Yeah, didn't have a lot of time to chat beforehand, but I've been watching the news and Facebook and everywhere else, and it's either doom or gloom, or people are happy about certain things. So, what is the real news out there?
So there's just been a lot of information, a lot to probably unpack in this session. So I think maybe some people may have to re-look at it, revisit it to know what's going on. But it's quite important that if you are unsure of what your situation is, either call immigration, look on the immigration website, or speak to an advisor, because there's just been so much. And over the weeks as well, there's just little bits and pieces, and I'll go through that now. So currently we have 2 consultations out. Those consultations are for the AEWV scheme, and that's looking at the employer accreditation, job checks, and the AEWV work visas itself. So that's been responded to, and I believe that we may get something towards the end of the year or maybe earlier next year with regards to how accreditation is going to work, how job checks are going to work, and so on. Now, look, what they sort of toying with and have asked is for employers that are well established, have good practices and so on, should they get longer accreditation? Should they be reviewed, for their business practice? Or what about third-party checks? Who do we think would do those sorts of things? Same with the job check process and so on. So there's a lot of information in there to respond to. And that's the new sort of framework that the government wants to work towards. So it's almost a mixture of the old accreditation scheme that was in existence and a bit of the new and the new one as well. So they kind of want to find a happy medium. I don't know whether they will be able to do that. When I saw the consultation, I had more questions than anything. I personally chose not to respond because it infuriated me in ways that it just infuriated a lot of the people in the industry. So anyway, but that's my personal opinion. So it's not the opinion of other advisors. So that.
I have a problem with these people sitting on spousal visas. I'm not going to put I know it's this AEVW thing that they are here as the partners, but they can't work.
Yes. And I'll come back to that because there's, and I'll talk about maximum continuous stay a little bit further in our conversation, because that's a big one that's going to affect a lot of people. And I think they probably need to be aware of how it's going to affect them and so on. So I'll come to that if that's okay, Jan. That's all right, because I know people have a lot of questions, and I've seen a lot of questions on Facebook and so on, and I'd like to sort of address some of those things as well around redundancies and so on. The next consultation that we have, and this was on the 8th of October that it just came out, so it was just 2 days ago, where Stats New Zealand has announced that they are going to overhaul the ANSCO system that we have and the way they classify jobs. And they're going to go onto a New Zealand sort of fit-for-purpose occupation list. Right now, they don't really have a name, so they're calling it the NOL, or the National Occupation List, and they will obviously come up with a new name as that goes through. So what they've done is they've put a consultation out now. This is a second consultation where they said, okay, up to 10 occupations, anybody can respond saying, what do you want, with the levels, the qualifications of those roles, the synonyms that may be for those roles and so on. So that's currently what's in process. So that will close at the end of this month on the 30th. And on the 20th of November, we will find the first phase or the first list being released. Now, Immigration New Zealand has signaled that they will do a switch over sometime in 2025. Now, again, that raises a hell of a lot of questions for people in the industry as to what on earth and how will it affect the people currently on certain ANSCO levels and so on. So we don't have any answers to that, and we'll almost have to wait and see. And that's the current 2 consultations that are out.
Okay.
So that's the main things. The flow-on effects, again, the AEW scheme, you'll probably look at maybe it will affect the maximum continuous stay, which I'll talk about a little bit later, and maybe residents as well. So again, unsure. Earlier on I shouldn't say earlier on, maybe about August, Erica Stanford spoke to the EMA around occupations and those roles that don't meet any residence pathway, and they're not earning 1.5 of median wage. They don't have level 6 qualifications or occupational registration. So she spoke about having a pathway for them, or some sort of pathway for them. Now, the talk is that they may announce this towards the end of this year, but again, don't hold your breath, because we don't know what's going to happen and what those occupations are going to be and how it's going to look and affect people. So those are the two main, or the main things that's happening overall. Sorry, Jan, I can see you burning to ask me a question.
I'm just wondering, and this is something I've been dealing with this year. How many people has gone back due to this?
I think a lot of people, if you look at the Facebook groups, I think a lot of people just feel that there's no pathway and so on. And especially with them not being able to support partners, or their partners really struggling to find work with accredited employers, because there's less and less employers becoming accredited. And that was initially in 2022 when they released this AWV scheme. They did say initially there'll be a whole lot of people applying for accreditation, and over time accreditation will decrease. So those partners are finding it hard. Cost of living is really high. New Zealand is not as attractive as what it used to be, and that's the reality.
Vanita, my conclusion to this is, I think the amount of money that person has to earn, and I'm talking about has to earn, I think it's way too high.
As in the median wage?
Yeah.
Yes, and that's the other thing as part of the consultation that they currently have, is they want to scrap the median wage and they want to put something else in its place. So they've asked questions around what would certain things look like. But again, we don't know. We can't say. We're not the statisticians. We're not the data analysts. MB has all of this, So we don't know.
Politicians sometimes are just, I can't use that word that's in my mind now, but they want to do this. We have got a massive problem with people doing the I would say the lower class jobs. Sorry if I'm wrong here, but jobs like cleaning, jobs like doing these type of things. But we can't use the people we have here, because we want them to have this amount of money which nobody's willing to pay.
Yes. And that's the thing, the issue with the AWV when it opened and the borders opened as well is that there was a huge influx of low-skilled employees or migrant workers coming in. And this is what's happened, and it's taken away jobs from New Zealanders. And they're being paid at the median wage or well above, and your New Zealanders are not getting paid that sort of money. And now that we're in a recession, employers are really, really struggling to keep these people. And that's why you're seeing so many redundancies and so on. And obviously the government's cancelled a lot of projects as well. So that's had a flow-on effect to every other employee or employer.
I often have to sleep out in hotels and stuff like this. In the past, you could book in at 2:00 in the afternoon.
Yes.
These days, it's either 3:00 or 4:00, and they say we do not have staff to clean the rooms as we have in the past. Now, we're sitting with a lot of people onshore that are willing to do their jobs.
Yes.
The New Zealanders aren't doing their jobs.
Yes.
But we can't use them.
So let me just talk about this. I read a cabinet paper, and this is where some of the changes have come through as well. And one of the changes is what I was going to talk about. So, and these are low skill level roles, which is ANSCO level 4 and 5. Now, immigration have said that employers, if they want to employ people, and it's if it's going to be migrants, they have to give New Zealanders a first preference. So when they advertise, they have to go to MSD or WINS to do that, right? MSD is Ministry of Social Development. They have to meet all the criteria of this. Now, the cabinet paper has said that MSD has presented about 3,000 odd New Zealanders willing and able to do those jobs. I don't know if there's any issues around showing up for work, being drunk, or I shouldn't say drunk, intoxicated with whatever. I don't know. Ankle bracelets, I don't know, right? But out of those 3,000 odd people that were presented to employers, only 45 New Zealanders or resident visa holders were employed. Now, they've taken away the ability for advisors to help employers with advertising at Ministry of Social Development, because they've said in their cabinet paper that advisors are financially incentivized to put a migrant worker in those roles. So in other words, they don't trust the work that we are doing, and there's mistrust. There's also mistrust by INZ and MB because they have evidence that advisors or people are coaching people to claim refugee, or I should say, the migrant protection exploitation visa. They're being coached to make these claims, and these are called the golden visas. So in other words, now MB or the compliance team is 3 years behind actually investigating refugees, if it's a genuine case, if you've put in a case for that, if it's a genuine case of exploitation because of these false claims. Now, they're calling it the golden visa because once you claim this, you have open work rights and you can go and work for any employer. And this is what they're claiming that advisors are doing in the industry. And there's a whole lot of mistrust in the industry right now. And this is in a cabinet paper and it's open to the public. So this is where we are sort of almost, getting the tail end or being affected by what's happening.
Yeah, it's always two sides to the story, eh?
That's why they've made these changes on ANSCO, saying, right, the employer has to be direct contact with MSD. We don't want advisors in there or lawyers in there. So there's a lot of changes that's happened and been announced, and I think some people have missed some of it, and they're quite important. One is the drop box that we have in Auckland that's closing on the 8th of November. So you can't physically go and take your papers, your application, and drop them in, including a passport. Or you've got to actually courier through because they've said that immigration is moving. The other part is that they're improving the AEW scheme. So what they're doing is they've opened up, or I should say, the processing time. So right now, from a job check to an accredited employer work visa and getting somebody on shore, it's taking about 18 weeks. Okay, so that's quite a long time. So what they've announced is they're going to improve the processing time. So they're going to group applications, for instance, like if it's a family visa. So if the accredited employer work visa is approved first, they'll do the family visa. So that'll be faster because it's a group application. They're already doing green list in tier 1 and tier 2, but they're going to start to group like applications together. Also, people being made redundant. So that's what's going to happen. The next part of it that they've announced is that people, they've provided easier ways for advisors and employers to notify immigration when people are being made redundant, being dismissed, or resigns from employment on accredited employer work visas. Now, these are people that have a length of time on their visa longer than a month. And the employer or the advisor needs to notify immigration within 10 days of that happening, 10 working days of that happening. So they've made it easier because this is all about compliance and making sure that they have or know where people are. Now, there is the consultation out where they are toying with the idea, because I know people have said, how long do you have until you can find a job if you've been made redundant? They are looking at possibly giving somebody 3 months.
But that is current date now. How much month?
They say reasonable time. There's no date. There's no time frame. So reasonable time can be how long's a piece of string.
I actually had that question from a client of mine that is in a position where people around him has been made redundant. So, yeah. But I just said you should go and talk to immigration. But
yes. So again, you need to notify immigration of that's changed. But right now it's still reasonable time. But the consultation that's out is saying, should we give them 3 months to be able to remedy this situation?
So who notifies immigration? Do I, as the guy who's been made redundant, or does the employer?
The employer has an obligation under the accreditation to do that, and that's within 10 business days. But you as an applicant should also be doing that, because what could happen is when you apply for another visa further down the line, you could be caught out for a character issue. Okay. So you don't want that happening. So you'd rather advise immigration of that.
So the old thing of I didn't know won't work yet.
No, it doesn't work anymore, and you can't say and hide behind it, because you'll be questioned on your character, and that's a big issue. So the next thing that is happening or happened on the 7th of October is that advisors, as I said, can no longer assist employers with WINS or Ministry of Social Development. It's the employer or the recruiter that has to deal with them directly. Now, on the 1st of October, partners of New Zealand citizens who have been living together for 12 months or more and have evidence of that can get longer visas, and this is 3 years, and this is in line with other visas that are in place. So if you've been living with your partner for less than 12 months, you will still get the 12-month visa. But if you can show evidence of living together for 12 or more months, and this is New Zealand citizens and residents supporting those partners, then you can get 3 years on a work visa or whatever visa you're applying for. On the 1st of October, the fees have increased and increased massively. And I mean, like a residence visa was $4,290. It's now $6,000 somewhat for a family. So it's quite significant changes on that. Even accredited employer work visas and so on. So it's costing quite a bit of money to bring a family over.
It's rather hectic. I know a lot of people has now started to save drastically just to get this done. And I mean, that's the only way they can do that.
Yes, exactly. And yeah, it's unfortunate because once those visas are up for renewal, it's gone in one hit. And if you are not, one of the things that this is the next segue, is if you are applying for your visa and your application is not complete, if you, for instance, applying for work to residence as an example, and you haven't met the 24 months and you applied in the 22nd month, just to avoid fee increases, immigration are declining those visas. So if you lost $4,000 odd for residence, and you'd have to pay again because you did not meet the criteria. So there's something that we follow, which is at the time of lodgement, you have to meet the criteria. Yeah. And at the time of assessment, you have to meet the criteria. And immigration are taking no prisoners in this at all.
Okay. So they're making money.
Exactly. And you know what? They increased the...
With off stuff.
Well, no, it's the truth, because the minister has said that in order, the people that are benefiting from the system are the ones that have to finance the system. So they've spent millions on the system and they've been making a loss. So this is what's happening.
Oh, well.
Yes. Yeah. So one of the other things is if you're an international student and applying for an international student visa, they want you to do that 3 months ahead of time just to avoid any delays. The other thing is, and this is a big one, I think people need to be aware of. So immigration are saying to employers, look, if you've got accredited employer work visa holders, and they've got 3-year or 5-year work visas, you don't need to renew your accreditation. So a lot of employers are doing this and not renewing their accreditation until they need to, until they have maybe the next lot of people to employ. Now, what's happening is people are employing for residence. And sometimes because you don't need to make your employer aware that you are applying for residence, you are unaware that that accreditation may have lapsed. Now, okay. And if that accreditation has lapsed, your residence visa would be declined because your employer is no longer accredited. So you need to have a conversation with your employer that if you're applying for residence, ask them the question, do you hold accreditation? Check on the immigration website as well. Is the accreditation still there? If it's going to expire, have they applied for a new accreditation? Please do that because you are going to lose your money.
Won't that affect me on a work visa if I'm with an employer and the accreditation now lapsed?
No, it doesn't, because you still hold an accredited employer work visa. It's only when you're doing maximum continuous stay or when you are doing your residence that the employer still needs to hold accreditation. And this is where people are getting caught out and realizing that, and employers are doing this unintentionally. It's because immigration are saying to them that this is what you can do.
Yeah.
So they sort of don't want to go through the hassle. So, that's...
Is there a way to see if my employer is accredited still without going to the employer? Is there a way to see if my employer is accredited?
Yes, on the immigration website, or asking for the accreditation certificate. So you can go to HR and ask them, or on the immigration website. So it's important that you are aware that these things are happening. Jan, is there any questions so far?
No, not really. Not
Okay,
really.
that's all right.
If there's any questions, guys, pop them up and we'll try and get them on screen if possible. So
It's okay. So one of the other changes that have come through is that some sector agreements or sectors like the meat and processing and tourism, hospitality, they've increased the short-term exemptions and to avoid shortages. So in other words, they've made it easier for people to bring in, and they've increased the caps to be able to bring people in under these sector agreements. So that was effective on the 8th of September. One important thing that people, and I think some people have missed, is that if you have a residence application in and you have children between the ages of 17 and 24, and they're included in your residence application, and they hold a valid visitor visa, they can get part-time work rights. So that's quite important. 20, so it's a time frame. So 20 hours between a certain period of time, and then I think it's between the summer they can work full time.
okay.
So that's on the immigration website. So if you have children that are older that are sitting at home, but you have a residence application or you're about to lodge residence, they can get work rights. You've got to apply, so make sure you're aware of that, and they can do that. So they at least they're earning some money and sort of getting some skills while you're waiting for residence to be processed.
All right, I've got a question. Ken Riley asking, is the green list going to change in terms of trades being added or removed?
They are reviewing it, and very likely that it will. We can't say which ones and so on, because they obviously respond to labor shortages and so on the green list. So that will go according to what Stats NZ does and the labor market is doing.
That's right. What can we do about the nurses and the doctors? We need more of them here.
We do, but then there's a lot of nurses that have come in that are unemployed, and that's a major issue right now, not so much for the doctors, but for the nurses and also for the care workforce as well, where they've studied the levels that they needed to study, but they can't secure jobs, even though the government has said, we've got these sector agreements, you have a pathway to residence and so on. So that is currently an issue and a big issue. And there's a lot of Facebook groups of different nationalities saying, don't come to New Zealand. And this is for nurses and this is for care workforce sector as well. Don't come to New Zealand. You will do all this and you won't be able to get a job. And it's a problem. Yes, it's a problem.
Another question popping up. If you're holding a 3-year visa, I think it's AEWV, how and when can one apply for the extension up to 5-year extension?
Right. So that's fine. And I think, as I said, I'll talk about maximum continuous stay. So maximum continuous stay is the total time you can stay in New Zealand on one or more accredited employer work visas. But the maximum stay is 5 years. Once you reach 5 years, there's a 12-month stand-down period.
Okay.
Now whether you've got residence and so on, right now we don't know, because previously we kind of knew you could stay if you had residence lodged. Right now they've taken that away, so we don't know what that's going to look like. So you have to be eligible for maximum continuous stay. So this is what's going to catch out a lot of people, because all this is coming up for renewal and so on. So employers don't need to re-advertise and do a labor market test. They can use the same job token, and you can apply. If you've got a 3-year accredited employer work visa, you can apply for the additional 2 years. Okay. Now, this, while it is an extension per se, it's a brand new application. In other words, by that time, your police certificate will expire, your medical certificates will expire. You will need those. All right. And that would be probably for the whole family.
Okay.
So expect those costs. The other thing is,
the time do you apply?
You can only apply 9 months prior. You can't apply. You can put your application in, but they will only look at it 9 months prior to that expiring.
Okay.
And be able to give you the go-ahead to apply. Now, what's going to happen is, ANSCO was not important, or ANSCO skill level was not important until the 6th of April, 2024. So a lot of employers and some advisors sort of, if they weren't too sure about ANSCO, used a level that may not be the correct level. Now, that's going to catch out a lot of people, because If your ANSCO level is sitting at level 4 or level 5, okay, and that is the unskilled, you are not eligible for maximum continuous stay.
Okay.
So that may mean that, and say for instance, your job is genuinely skilled, but it was done in error. That will mean that you cannot use the existing job token that the employer had.
Okay.
It means that the employer will have to do a new job check, new token, and obviously a labor market test and so on with that. And you know what the timeframes are. I said it's about 18 weeks. Okay. From there, you will have to apply for a new accredited employer work visa, but you won't be given 3 years. You'll be given the balance, which will be 2 years.
Okay.
All right.
All right. Can we take some questions?
Yes.
If you can't get things to work in New Zealand, would you be able to go to Australia, or would you need to go back to South Africa?
If you're eligible for any visa in Australia, you should possibly be looking at those options if that's something that you want to do. Again, it's going to cost you money for health, your character, or I should say medicals, police checks, and so on. And also, it depends. So you could look at various streams of what will give you residence in Australia.
Okay. Another question coming from Diane Fisser saying, if you work on work to residence green list tier 2, will the new changes affect your pathway?
So we usually don't do changes retrospective. So those people, like for instance, truck drivers, when they made all the changes in on the 6th of April, truck drivers were no longer on the sector agreement, but the ones that were already there and meeting the criteria were. Okay. So no, you won't be affected if you're already on a pathway.
All right. So if you are on the pathway, stay there, don't move. You won't be.
Exactly.
Daphne could see asking, what about students of AEWV parents who finish school and they don't qualify to apply for residency yet? Does that mean students can't work or study indefinitely till they qualify for residency? Example, 13-year student arrived recently, blah, blah, blah.
No, unfortunately, they'll be in the same situation as previously, where you have no work rights. You're unable to study, and so unless you're an international student.
Okay, so then that's costing money.
Yes, exactly. Yes, yeah.
So we've got about 3 minutes left. I don't see a lot of other questions. Let me just look on the other channel.
So coming back to maximum continuous stay, just be aware, you probably need to go back to your employer and ask them, when you did the job check, what was the skill level? Make them aware that this is what could have happened. Now, there is a date from 21st of June 2023 to the 6th of April 2024. If you got your work visa during that time, and if it was an accredited employer work visa with 3 years, you will be given your 2 years, because the government said that they will honor that because they made those announcements. But prior to that, you have to be eligible for maximum continuous stay. If you're on a skill level 4 and you want to stay longer, you will have to do English tests and so on, which is required for that. So just be aware that these are the things. There's a lot of issues around it. There's a lot of things that's going to happen, and a lot of people are going to get caught out. One important thing is, if your partner came in on open work rights, when you do your maximum continuous stay, they're not going to have open work rights. They're going to have conditions. That means that they would have to be on a visitor visa for the 2-year extension, and they will have to find an accredited employer to work for to be able to continue working. So be aware of that.
Question popping up, Leda Foppen-Besainer asking, so hairdressers can't come over anymore and get residency?
Not at this stage, no. Unless if they're earning 1.5 of median wage, no.
So they can come over and earn, if they earn more, and still get residency?
Yes, or if they're willing to come for 3 years and work overseas for 3 years, then they can, absolutely. But if you're not meeting the criteria of the pathways to residence, then no. So, yeah.
Okay. Anything else?
No. So it's quite a bit of information. Just be aware of what's happening. There will be probably more announcements towards the end of the year or next year. And there'll be a lot of changes coming through, but I don't know how it's going to affect people.
Well, you did well for 30 minutes, I can't say.
Thank you very much. Jan, I want to ask you a question.
Yep.
What do you do with the solar panel on your ute?
I've got 2 batteries in, and I want to keep my fridge at the back on permanently.
Right.
The problem is I don't drive the ute every day, so sometimes it stands outside for 3 or 4 days without even the engine starting,
Okay.
and then the second battery runs down.
Right. Okay.
But I like a nice cool drink or Coke or cold water when I get in the vehicle or whenever I drive back from anywhere. So
Okay. I just thought you were preparing for an apocalypse or something, so that's
I'm
why.
not one of those people.
Thank you, Jan.
It's always a problem to have enough power when you go anywhere.
Yeah.
And I found that my batteries run down once we are at home. So, all right. Thanks a lot, Vanita. I'm just going to pop you out, then we'll chat after this.
Sure.
All right. That was Vanita. Vanita, thanks a lot for everything. Always very informative. Guys and girls, until next week, same time, same place.